The Collector's Museum is a place filled to the brim with Easter eggs from all across Marvel's vast lore, and in this video I'm going to be breaking down every single one of them, so grab a branch and get comfy as we begin our tour. Starting off in the Defender's spawn room, we have an Ultron drone that appears during his ult animation. Then we have Ice Crusher, Laufey's hammer from What If Thor Was Raised by Frost Giants, which is a retelling of the war between the Frost Giants and the Asgardians, where instead of Odin finding Loki and taking him in, Laufey slays Odin and takes Thor in and raises him as his own, leading to Thor becoming the god of frost. You can see the hammer being wielded by Thor in the skin of the same name. Continuing our tour of the spawn room, we also have Hela's Nightsword from the Grim Lady skin, a rival's original skin debuting in Season 4. A statue of the immortal Avatar Adam Warlock skin, another creation for the Marvel Rivals universe, which released in Season 2. Lady Loki's scepter from the Lady Loki skin, originally introduced in Thor Volume 3, Number 5, where Loki is reincarnated as a woman. Star-Lord's element guns from when he is elected the leader of the Spartax Empire in Guardians of the Galaxy Number 1 in 2015, which inspires his King of Spartax skin in Marvel Rivals. Another weapon next, this time from Punisher's Danganronpa skin, first appearing in Rivals Season 2, which is not the only time the Punisher will appear in this video. Finally, we have the Spider Totem, which according to the Marvel Rivals lore is from Tokyo 2099 and is one of the Master Weaver's ancient mystical artifacts. However, its appearance seems to be based on the Spider Idol from the comics, which can bestow powers on people. For example, in the Noir universe, it powers a machine that allows Madame Sturm to become a variant of Swarm. This wraps up the spawn room, though if we leave it and immediately go to the floor above, we can also find a symbiote plant like the ones that appear on the Clintar map, and also get befriended by Groot in his lore story. In the same room as the symbiote plant, there is an item that I'm not entirely sure about. My immediate thought was it possibly the Cauldron of the Cosmos from Doctor Strange comics, or perhaps the Eternal Flame, as upon looking at it more, it looks very Asgardian in design, though it does also look a lot like the Kirby Crackle that Jack Kirby used in the comics to denote cosmic power, and the Marvel Rivals wiki says the same thing, calling them Kerbons. However, I'm not sure. I still think it could be an actual artifact. Then we have this thing, which my immediate thought was something celestial, but I couldn't for the life of me figure out what or even know where to begin my search for it. Though the Rival Wiki also states that this is a piece of armor from a Celestial, so is that what it is? Let me know what you think these items are in the comments below. I look forward to reading your theories. The last item in this room is a Wakandan mask from the Intergalactic Empire of Wakanda maps. In the next room, we have two very recognisable suits. The Mark I Iron Man suit, the one that started it all, both in comics and in the MCU. And also we have Penny Parker's Venom skin, which in the comics was actually a mech modelled after Penny's spider suit, but infused with the Sim engine and piloted by Addie Brock. Whilst the bonds seemed to go well at first, during a battle against a kaiju, Venom started to take over and assimilate Addie until there was nothing left of her but a mass of green tendrils. Next up is an object instantly recognisable to anyone that is a fan of the comics or the MCU, the Cosmic Cube. Though the two sources differ in name and powers, the Marvel database summarises the comic history of the Cosmic Cube brilliantly, stating, "Cosmic cubes are reality-altering objects that grant their users wishes. They contain energy gifted to sentient life by the Beyonders and can even evolve into beings of their own, like the Shaper of Worlds or Cubic." Whereas in the MCU, the Cosmic Cube is called the Tesseract and contains one of the 6 Infinity Stones, the Space Stone. Over to our right, we have the Superhuman Registration Act, an item of great importance to both the history of the comics and again the MCU, though as with the Tesseract, the MCU renames it to the Sokovia Accords. The effect it has, however, are the same in both worlds, making superheroes register their information, including their real names, with the US government and placed on a database allowing them to be monitored, licensed, and even employed by the US government. Both the Superhuman Registration Act and the Sokovia Accords are the catalyst for their respective universes' Civil War event. Another instantly recognisable item again next, with Professor X's hover chair. Seeing this in game for the first time was a huge surprise. The hover chair is synonymous with Professor X, and it was an iconic part of his design in the 90s X-Men cartoon. In the comics, it was created by another mutant, Forge, This chair was designed to incorporate Shi'ar technology and allowed the professor to get around much more easily, with the hover chair being unaffected by terrain. Our second hammer of the tour now, and this one is another powerful item that has appeared in both comics and the MCU, though as with the other exhibits that have appeared in both, its appearance differs between sources. It's Stormbreaker. In the MCU, Thor and Eitri create Stormbreaker on Nidavellir to defeat Thanos on his quest for the Infinity Stones. In the comics, however, it wasn't even Thor's hammer. Whilst it shares its properties, abilities, and even origin, its owner is a different being entirely. Stormbreaker in the comics is the hammer of Beta Ray Bill, the Corbinite counterpart to Thor who earned Stormbreaker after defeating Thor in battle and taking Mjolnir. Heading towards the garden, the next exhibit is another one that I'm not quite sure on. I couldn't find anything resembling this in my research. My immediate thought was that it was a light tree from Alfheim, growing alongside the Light Elves perhaps, or maybe a sapling of Yggdrasil, but I couldn't prove or disprove either of these. So another question for my sloths. What do you think this is? Let me know in the comments. I'm pretty sure this next exhibit is the skeleton of an Acanti, an ancient race of spacefaring whale-like creatures with the capability of travelling faster than light. In fact, in the Uncanny X-Men 166 comic, the Brood, a bit more on them later on, enslaved the Acanti to use them as faster-than-light ships to travel the universe, and in that story it mentions that the Brood have the skeletal remains of an Acanti prophet singer, which could well be the skeleton we're looking at right here. Continuing further into the museum, we come across what appears to be an empty exhibition case, but before long a scroll appears in the case as if out of nowhere. This is in fact one of the most important pieces of lore in all of Marvel history, as this little piece of parchment is what starts one of the most famous Marvel villains on his quest for domination, both in the comics and within the Rivals lore too. This is the soul contract that Cynthia Von Doom signed with Mephisto in exchange for powerful magic to topple a tyrant and liberate her people. This didn't go to plan and she ended up dying and her soul being claimed by the Demon Lord. Trying to get her soul back is one of Victor Von Doom's main reasons for becoming Doctor Doom, one of the most powerful sorcerers and scientists in the Marvel Universe, and the main antagonist to some of the biggest events in Marvel lore, like Secret Wars and even the whole reason behind the time stream entanglement in Rivals itself. Behind us to our left is another incredibly powerful and troublesome artifact from the comics, the Black Vortex. Created by the Celestial Godhead, the Black Vortex grants users unimaginable powers, but they can come at a great cost. As the Vortex's first user, Gara says in the legendary Star-Lord Volume 1, Issue 11, the Vortex elevates you to a cosmic entity, but there is no accounting for what it does to your heart. Moving over to the attacker's spawn room, I have absolutely no idea what this skeleton is from. It looks like some sort of saber-toothed lizard, but when I searched this, it only came up with info for lizard and saber-tooth. Could it be one of Marvel's many dinosaurs? If you have any ideas or theories, I'd love to hear them below. Here, we have what I thought at first was Giganto, the deviant mutate from Fantastic Four #1. However, the colour is wrong. Giganto is usually shown as having green skin, but this one has brown. And whilst this could well just be a design choice by NetEase, I do believe that this is actually Giganto's mate, which does visually match what we see here with the depiction in the comics. Just below this, we have one of Marvel's most famous animals, Howard Duckson, better known as Howard the Duck. He's had many comic book appearances over the years, getting into all sorts of shenanigans and bouncing between universes, that it would take too long to go over all of them in this video. However, this isn't the first time he has been part of the Collector's Menagerie, as he appears in the Guardians of the Galaxy film on Nowhere, also being held captive by the Collector. He also had his own pre-MCU film adaptation that was odd. Opposite Howard's display, we have another exhibit containing two more very popular animals in Marvel's lore. First off, we have Lockheed, the dragon-like alien that is the companion of Kitty Pryde of the X-Men, having spent most of his time travelling with her on her heroic adventures, though there was a period where Kitty joined up with the Guardians of the Galaxy, and Lockheed's whereabouts were unknown. My personal headcanon is that during this time, he joined up with Illyana Rasputin, better known by Rivals players as Magik, in the 2020 film The New Mutants, where we see Lockheed accompanying Magik in Limbo. though I will admit the timings don't quite line up, and I have no idea how he travelled to another universe. Just above Lockheed, we have possibly Marvel's most famous bird, Redwing. This avian companion of Sam Wilson's Falcon is telepathically linked to Sam thanks to the Red Skull messing with the previously mentioned cosmic cube, allowing Falcon to communicate with Redwing telepathically and even allow Sam to see through his partner's eyes. Redwing does also appear in the MCU, however with a much different appearance, this time being a drone that Sam can control from a paddle on his wrist or via verbal communications. Directly behind this display we have a fearsome looking Brood Queen. To quote the Marvel database, the Brood are an utterly savage insectoid alien race driven primarily by hunger and procreation. The Brood reproduce parasitically, their queens implanting eggs in other living beings. Those embryos metamorphose their hosts' bodies until they hatch, fully consuming the hosts and converting them into members of the Brood, who retain each host's knowledge and abilities. As such, the Brood often seek out superior life forms to use as hosts. The Brood have appeared in many different comic stories and universes within Marvel lore, and have now travelled over to the Marvel Rivals universe. Could they be the enemies in a new wave-based PvE mode like Marvel Zombies? A short walk across the room is another display case with a very familiar, if undead face inside. The Frankencastle Punisher. This skin comes from Punisher number 154, where Frank Castle gets killed and dismembered by Wolverine's son Darken, but gets put back together and reanimated by Morbius, who with the Legion of Monsters need Frank's help to fight off a group of monster hunters. Frank eventually helps the Legion of Monsters, and after trying to take his revenge on Darken, is then returned to his normal human self by Elsa Bloodstone, and the power of her Bloodstone. I imagine that, with the time stream entanglement and Elsa's work retrieving monsters for the Collector's Museum, rather than help Frank, she captured him. Heading back towards the Brood Queen and through a hole to the floor above, we have our first dinosaur of the video. Devil Dinosaur. Dinosaur. From an alternate reality Earth called Dinosaur World, where he was saved from death by Moonboy, and the two team up for various adventures. Eventually, Moonboy is killed, and Devil Dinosaur ends up being transported to Earth 616, where he teams up with Moon Girl. In a double-stacked case next to Giganto's mate are two more faces that Rivals players will be very familiar with. We have Namor in his Monstro King skin that was introduced in Rivals Season 5. Below him we have Capwolf, a skin inspired by Cap's appearance in Captain America number 405, where Steve Rogers is turned into a superhuman werewolf for a few issues before ultimately being turned back to Steve Rogers' regular human form. Elsa must have once again swooped in and snatched Cap before he could be cured of his lycanthropy. Opposite this display, we will find the ever-adorable Cosmo the Space Dog. Cosmo, based on the story of Laika, was a dog sent into space by the Soviet space program during the early 60s spaceflight tests. Unlike Laika, however, Cosmo ended up drifting out of Earth orbit and was mutated by some cosmic rays before ending up on Nowhere, becoming the chief of security. Cosmo later went on adventures with Nova and the Guardians of the Galaxy, and he was last seen on Nowhere after being poisoned and saved by Nova. Over here we have Maestro, a version of the Hulk that combines Banner's brains with Hulk's darker side from a post-apocalyptic alternate universe. First appearing in the Future Imperfect comic series from 1992, where nuclear wars and chemical attacks had left the world desolate, without superheroes, and almost erasing humanity from existence. Next to Maestro we have Throg, a human from an alternate universe called Simon Waterson, who was cursed and transformed into a frog. He then joined a clan of frogs in Central Park, and was given the name Puddlegulp. Now, just that line alone is crazy, but wait till you hear the summary from the Marvel database. When Thor had been turned into a frog by Loki, he met Puddlegulp and his clan. Thor aided Puddlegulp and Puddlegulp's people in defeating their rat adversaries. Thor left shortly after defeating the rats, but unbeknownst to him, he was followed by some rats. Puddlegulp followed to warn him, and witnessed the frog lift Mjolnir and wield the power of the god of thunder. However, a sliver of Mjolnir broke off when Toothnasher tapped it with his hoof. Once Thor departed, Puddlegulp was able to lift the sliver, which transformed into a miniature Mjolnir and granted the power of Thor to Puddlegulp. Puddlegulp became Throg, Frog of Thunder, and wielder of the mighty Frog Mjolnir. Okay, so these next two I could well be overthinking, but given some of the other contents of this museum, I think it's fair to assume that there could be more to these exhibits than just the obvious. So grab your tinfoil hat and let's speculate. First up, we have a mummy. Moving on. But no, this is exactly what I was talking about. Of course, this could well just be a mummy, but this is Marvel and I have a tinfoil hat. So let's go deeper. I think this could be Encantu the Living Mummy. A tribesman enslaved in ancient Egypt, after trying to revolt, Encantu was taken, wrapped in linen and injected with a substance granting him immortality, but leaving him immobilized, to be locked away in a sarcophagus, spending eternity as a living mummy. Fast forward to the 20th century, and after going insane because an earthquake left him buried for a millennia, the substance wears off and he finally digs his way out. The reason I think it's Encantu rather than just some mummy is the fact that Encantu has a history with both Elsa Bloodstone, where he acquired the Orb of Ra, an item capable of resurrecting the dead, but also was once tasked by Dracula to kill Deadpool, which ended up with Encantu being set on fire before being torn in half by a fire hose Deadpool shot at him. Could Deadpool or Elsa have taken Encantu after these encounters, locked him in the Collector's Museum and resurrected him with the Orb of Ra? The next exhibit is a bit trickier to nail down. At first glance it looks like a werewolf, but part of me thinks it might be a different cryptid instead, though I'm not sure which. However, whilst there are also a couple of characters it could be, like Nightwolf or Wolf King, I think this is Manwolf. The son of J. Jonah Jameson, John Jameson, was an astronaut who, whilst on a mission to the moon, found the Godstone, a gemstone imbued with the power of a god. This gemstone bonded with Jameson, transforming him into Manwolf, who, get this, was most recently a part of the defense of New York City when it was invaded by vampires during the Blood Hunt event in the comics. Sound familiar, rivals? In this third exhibit, we have a Yeti, and whilst there isn't a human character called Yeti, I don't think this is him, as his design is much more animalistic. I believe this is a specific Yeti that the Marvel database refers to as Guardian of the Gateway, and whilst there is no specific mention of which gateway, I believe it to be the entrance to Kunlun, as this is located in the Himalayas, which is where Black Panther encounters this Yeti. Kunlun being the focus of the story recently makes me think this could be when Elsa encountered this beast. Coming to the end of this part of the tour, this is the only one with no other possibilities, as this is quite clearly a mindless one. Created by a being from the dark dimension called Plotka to prevent his rival entities from getting too powerful, mindless ones are a force so destructive that even Dormammu had to lock them in a small region of the dark dimension to prevent them from wreaking havoc. Hiding in a room just above the Brood Queen, we will find our next Easter egg. Laying in stasis chambers, or maybe cloning chambers, are 5 women. These are the Stepford Cuckoos. 5 clones of Emma Frost, who are sent to infiltrate Xavier's school, created after Emma fell into a coma by the Weapons Plus program, which created Deadpool and Wolverine, among others. Harvested her DNA and created thousands of these clones, hoping to create a weapon capable of killing all mutants by using their combined telepathic powers. This project was also known as Weapon 14. Coming towards the end of our deep dive now, and up next is an item that has appeared in both the comics and the MCU, the Universal Weapon, also known as the Cosmirod. This cosmic warhammer is the weapon of the Kree Accusers, most notably Ronan the Accuser, and is capable of producing energy blasts and force fields, allowing its user to fly and even matter manipulation. Another cross-media weapon now, though the way it works differs slightly between comics and movies. This is Yondu's Yaka arrow. In the comics, Yondu has around 20 of these arrows, and they are fired from a bow, only being able to change direction mid-air by whistling. However, in the MCU, Yondu has only 1 of these arrows, and is connected to him via an implant in his head, and can be completely controlled via whistling. Our final human-ish hero next, Spider-Man's Man-Spider skin. This look came about during an altercation with Plant Man in Amazing Spider-Man number 437, when after chasing Plant Man into a sewer, Spidey is captured by vines and exposed to spores that trigger a mutation within him, turning him into a half-man, half-spider hybrid. Spidey is cured after using Plant Man's own spores against him, turning him into a plant creature, therefore forcing Plant Man to hand over the antidote. Now, onto our final living being of the video. This genetically engineered telepathic Deinonychus, otherwise known as Old Lace, was brought from the 87th century to be the companion of Gert Yorks of the Runaways, aiding them on their quests until both Gert is killed and Old Lace is teleported to the dinosaur world. Old Lace also appears alongside Gert in the TV adaptation of The Runaways, which is criminally underrated, and now that I think about it, long overdue for a rewatch. We end on the focus of one of the greatest comic book story arcs ever written, and thanks to the MCU's Infinity War and Endgame, now most likely the best known item in all of Marvel lore, the Infinity Gauntlet. Thanos used the gauntlet to hold the 6 Infinity Stones on his quest to prove his love to the cosmic entity Death by erasing half of all life in the universe. An event so catastrophic that it caused almost every being ever created by Marvel to join forces and stop him. Interestingly, with Secret Wars on the horizon for the MCU, it's worth noting that in the comic version of Secret Wars, the Infinity Gauntlet and 6 Infinity Stones make a reappearance when the Illuminati reassembled it and Captain America used it to prevent an incursion by pushing away one of the Earths and preventing them from colliding. And that brings us to the end of this comprehensive breakdown of all of the Easter eggs hidden around the Collector's Museum in Marvel Rivals. If you found any that I missed or have any theories of your own, I look forward to reading them in the comments. I think this is my longest, most in-depth video so far, so if you made it this far, thank you. If you can leave a like, it really helps me out, and subscribe if you haven't already. Until next time, stay curious, my sloths. Peace.